If I continue this style of sprinting up the mountain for the rest of my life, what's that going to do to my body? Is that going to lead to heart attacks? Is that going to lead to mental breakdowns? If you want to be healthier, if you want to enjoy life a little bit more, if you want to be more effective at work and actually be good at your craft, and if you want to have good relationships at your workplace, if you want to have good relationships personally, slowing down is the key to that. Hey everyone, welcome to the Real Estate and Financial Independence Podcast. As always, I'm Chad Carson, your host. You can also call me Coach, and this is a show all about helping you get out of the financial grind so you can do more of what matters. The title of today's episode is The Lost Art of Slowing Down. Now, you may not know this, but a lot of the topics I talk about on this podcast, a lot of the interviews I have, are always helpful for me, first and foremost. I'm the first audience member, the first listener. Today's topic about slowing down your business, slowing down your investing, slowing down your life is one that first and foremost, I always need to hear. And my family and I, many of you know, have moved to Spain. And one of my favorite parts about the Spanish culture, also a lot of the countries I visited in South America, is the appreciation for going a little bit slower when necessary or when it's appropriate. And so in this podcast episode, I want to talk about the hurry and the fast-paced life that almost all of us tend to be pressured into. And sometimes, it's appropriate. Sometimes there's a time for hustle when you're new to something, when you're growing your first, property or two. There's times you just have to hustle. You just got to be intense. You got to get it done. But I think what I want to talk about today is make the point that we're probably a little bit overbalanced. Maybe you know this. Maybe we're a little bit too stressed out. Maybe our health is suffering. Maybe even our business is suffering because we're hurrying, going faster and faster and faster. We don't get to enjoy it. Where maybe our relationships are suffering because we're all in on this other thing, but we're out of balance in another thing. And so that's the topic I want to cover today, talking about how to slow down more with our relationships, how to slow down more in our business and actually be more effective as real estate investors or whatever other job or business you're in, and also how to slow down in your personal life from a health standpoint, from an enjoyment standpoint, just to enjoy life a little bit more. So to get started, I want to tell you a story from my own life that really brought home this idea of the importance of slowing down. And we have to go back to 2009. This is before I had kids, and my wife and I were taking a trip to South America. We also went to Spain. This is a 4-month sabbatical mini retirement. We took our backpacks, we hit the road. I learned to speak Spanish in Peru. And as part of that experience in Peru, in South America, we went on a trip to a place called the Colca Canyon. It's kind of like the Grand Canyon of Peru. And it was really amazing. Had these areas with these old farms and mountains. You had to kind of go up on this old bus into the mountains. And we took a hike down to the floor of the Colca Canyon with a friend of ours. And it's about 2,500 feet down. And for whatever reason, I don't remember why, we had to get back that night to catch a bus early the next morning, but we wanted to go to the base of this canyon. And so it said, let's just do it. Let's climb all the way down. There's a little bar restaurant at the bottom with a little swimming pool. We thought that'd be fun, get in the swimming pool, come back up. And so we started hiking down. And just to give you some context, my wife and I are into outdoors. We're into hiking. We like hiking a lot. We live near the Appalachian Mountains in South Carolina. And so we do a lot of hiking in the kind of foothills of the mountains there. We're pretty fit and 29 years old. Let's do this. So we hike down the mountain, get to the little oasis down there at the bottom. It's a lot warmer at the bottom of the canyon, swim in the pool. There's really not any food there. I had some crackers and some beer at the bottom of this canyon. And we met some friends along the way. I think they were from Germany or from somewhere in Northern Europe. And they had a guide with them. And we kind of hung out with them, talked, and then looked at the clock. Eventually, all right, we need to head up, to go back up 2,500 feet and get back to our hotel in the little village at the end of the night. So we start climbing up, and my pace, typically, I enjoyed pushing myself. Hey, let's see how I'm in shape. Let's go up pretty quickly. So we start hiking a nice steady pace, and then faster, and we're going up fast. We're not resting that much. My wife and I are doing that with our friend. And the friends that we had met at the bottom, the Germans and their guide, they kind of got left behind a little bit, but their guide was keeping them a little slower pace, taking their time, resting a little bit, and we just kept going. Eventually, we were way farther up. We were about, a third of the way, almost halfway up. And I remember this moment vividly, and you'll see why this is an important moment in a moment. I turned around and waved at them and said, hey, with verbal communication, hey, what's going on? Why are you taking so long? We're way up here. Come on. And just kind of joking with them. And then I turn around and proceed to keep going. It must have been 5-10 minutes later that I hit a physical wall like I'd never hit in my life. I've played sports, played football, basketball, all sorts of sports, hit a wall where I could barely keep moving at this point. And it might have been part of the altitude. It might have just been pushing, might have been the not having much food that day. But from going really fast to taking 5 steps and then having to rest, taking another 3 steps and having a rest. And it got so painful and slow. It's hard to describe it to you, but all 3 of us, my wife and my friend, were all in pretty bad shape, but I was the worst one. I was having a really hard time. And, we're about halfway up this canyon, and it's taken a long time. And the people behind us, the Germans and their guide, they're getting a little closer. Eventually they pass us. And they're too nice of people to say anything to us. They just kind of smile and keep walking, and they keep going. The end of the story is that they were well into the village, well before nightfall. Us, it took so long. I was exhausted. It was in pain. And, we stumbled into the village after dark and barely got back to our place. It was one of the most humbling experiences of my life. And the takeaway for me, and this is a physical experience, right? But the takeaway was the attitude, the approach that I took to that climb was really relevant to a lot of parts of my life. I am still, I have a propensity to be a go-getter, set big goals. I'm ambitious. Let's go get this. Let's take this project on with an intensity and with a speed that often, works. It works in some situations, but there's always a cost to that as well, particularly on the longer climbs of life. This was a long climb. This is a long sustained climb at 9,000 feet of altitude. And when you start putting kind of pressure on yourself physically, at some point you're going to break down. We all have that point where we're going to break down. I found my humbling point, thankfully, and recovered from it there in the Colca Canyon in Peru. But this was an experience that really affected my attitude for a lot of other things, my real estate investing, how I approached different physical goals, how I approached my relationships and the balancing and work life. And I want to talk a little bit more about some practical ideas of how I try to approach that and apply it in my own life with humility. Not that I'm perfect at these things, but that might be helpful for you to help find that balance for yourself of slowing down, of still accomplishing your goals, still, making progress on things, but also being healthy about it and finding that place where you're enjoying the journey as well. I was not enjoying the journey up the Colca Canyon. I was pushing ahead, not even noticing what was around me. So again, I'm going to give you some practical tips in 3 different areas of your life: your relationships, or how you're working with people, with your work itself, and also with your personal habits. And the first one I want to start with is the people in your life. And this can apply to both your work relationships and your personal relationships. And the big takeaway, though, and I got this one from Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, one of my favorite books of all time. I read it right when I graduated from college. And he had this idea in the book that with people, slower is fast. So slow is fast. People are not machines. We're so used to processes and computers and machines. And it's true that with that kind of stuff, you want to be efficient. You want to take less time to do things. You want to find processes that speed things up and use less energy to get it done. But you know what? The opposite is true when you want to invest in relationships. That if you go fast with people, they're going to feel unimportant. They're going to feel that you're kind of glossing over their needs or what they're saying. You're not listening to them. And so my point here is to actually build into your entire life a slowness when it comes to people. Now, how do you do that? One of the practical strategies, and again, with humility, not perfect at this, but one of the best habits that I've tried to implement for myself is actually scheduling slow time with the people that are important in my business and the people that are important in my personal life. And this might sound, again, we're kind of all type A people here. We're goal setters to schedule time for people, really? It's the same way that you would schedule time for a doctor's appointment, the same way you would schedule for something else important in your life, you schedule it for people. So in your personal life, for example, I have a goal, my wife and I have been doing this for years now, is to at least have 1 day a week when it's just time for the 2 of us. And that's kind of evolved over time. Before we had kids, we might go out in the evening, go out and have some drinks or go out and have some fun somewhere. Since we have kids, is drop them off at school and have a time in the morning when we exercise together and go eat breakfast. And from a practical standpoint for me, in my schedule, it says, hey, from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10 or 11, 2 or 3 hour period, that's blocked off. And if you're a busy person, like a lot of you are, you've got to block those off. You got to put in your Google Calendar. You got to put in your paper calendar, whatever you use. That's time that can't get scheduled for something else. And you do it ahead of time. So I try to do that with my wife and I for our personal kind of dates or relationship time. I try to do that with my kids as well. Try to find some time, maybe a 5-minute time during the day when you do something slow with them. Like my kids, it might be drawing. They like to do art and they love it when dad draws with them. So maybe I have to take some time to do that before bed. Sometimes journaling with them. My daughters like to kind of doodle and journal. It might be just taking a walk with them. Walks are a really good way to slow things down. When people try to have meetings with me, which I don't do that often anymore, I'm almost always going to say, hey, instead of lunch, instead of breakfast, let's take a walk. We're getting some movement. It's naturally slow. So those are all ways that I do it in my personal life. But the same thing can apply to your business. And so if you're in real estate investing, the number one thing that I've always tried to prioritize is having face-to-face meetings, or these days it could be a Zoom, but face-to-face to me is always the best, with the important people in my business. This could be my business partner. This could be one of my team members. Like I used to have a bookkeeper and kind of an assistant who did a lot of things for me. We've kind of leaned things up a little bit and hired property managers to do that. But also sellers, people who are selling you a property, private lenders, people who are lending you money. I would make literally a goal every single week to have slow meetings with those people. So if every day when I was really buying a lot of properties, if I was having a meeting with a seller for a couple hours, that was successful. I knew for a fact my business would be very profitable if I was meeting face-to-face with a seller every single day. And I would take my watch off, my cell phone would be away. It was all about them. And that's the next point I want to make. Your number one, schedule time for relationships in your business and your personal life. Take your time with that. Number two, give them your full attention. This is such a critical point because it's so rare these days to give somebody your full attention. Looking them in the eye, like right there at them. Hey, you got my attention. I'm listening to you. I got no distractions. My cell phone is off. I like to put my cell phone, like if I had an appointment with a seller to buy their house, cell phones is on airplane mode because if I have to take some pictures with it, for example, but it's not, the ringer's off. I'm not using it. I'm not looking at it. If I'm having a time, a date morning with my wife, cell phone's away, not looking at it. Same with my kids. That is the big distraction for all of us these days. You're going to be tempted to look at your cell phone. And my podcast editor and assistant for everything I'm doing here and content-wise, Michael Wen, made a suggestion when we talked about this topic. He said there's a game a lot of people he knows play that if you go out with your friends to have a drink or have a meal or something, the game he suggested was everybody put your cell phone on the table, and the first person to look at their cell phone has to pay for the meal for everybody else. Think about that. A little bit of motivation, right? The only negative for me of that game is you're actually looking at the cell phone. You're still tempted to go, hey, is something going on? Put it away. Don't mess with it. Give people your full attention. That's part of the slowness. And there's nothing, brilliant about that. But the relationships and people have been doing that for years. Lately with the cell phones and with the fast culture right now, you just want to get a hit. You want to look at Instagram. You want to look at what's going on with people. Slower is fast. That's how you build relationships in your business. That's how you get private money. That's how you buy properties. That's also how you have strong relationships in your personal life is by giving them attention and prioritizing it. So the second takeaway I'd like to share with you in this episode has to do with your work, and it has to do with something called deep work. I read a book by Cal Newport, one of my favorite authors on productivity and doing good work. This book, Deep Work, was a game changer for me. It kind of validated something I'd always known and try to practice a little bit in my life. And it's this, is that in the world we're living in, from a work standpoint, whatever job you're in, whatever profession, whether it's just your real estate investing or some other profession as well, we are in a state where it's a knowledge economy, where what you produce with your brain, also with your physical skills and certain professions as well, what you produce is the most important factor. But it's very rare for people to be able to focus on their craft, on what they do, on their skill set, and do it in a really focused, long, deep, professional way. Everybody's distracted. Everybody's flitting between this email and this tweet and this Instagram message, and they're going from this thing to that thing. Everybody, in summary, is distracted. And the ability to focus on one thing, whatever your work is, whether you're a carpenter, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a nurse, whether you're a real estate investor, whether you're a janitor who's doing a really good job cleaning something, your ability to focus without distraction is increasingly valuable in a distracted world. That was the main thesis of the book of Deep Work by Cal Newport. So if that's increasingly valuable because it's increasingly rare because nobody's doing it, at the same time, it's increasingly valuable because we're in an economy where it's less about, working on the assembly line. There's still physical jobs, but it's more about what kind of skill can you build? What kind of knowledge can you bring to your profession? And so the ability to think deeply or practice your craft to get better at it in an undistracted, long way is the most valuable skill you can have in whatever profession you're in. And so let's take that idea and apply it to whatever your profession is, whatever work profession, and it requires slowing down. Deep work is the art of slowing down at work. And I'll give you a couple examples in my own life. What I'm doing from a work standpoint has changed over the years. I was all in 60 to 80 hours per week early in my career as a real estate investor. And I was a wholesaler. I was buying properties and then selling them to other investors. I'd find really good deals. And then I eventually grew into fixing and flipping houses and then eventually buying just rental properties, but always buying. The acquisitions part of my business was the most valuable part. And it still is for you as a real estate investor. That's the most difficult part of the real estate investing business. And so I would always concentrate on deep work first thing in the morning on what could I do to produce leads that would come into my business from people who wanted to sell me their houses. So this was typically things like working on my direct mail letters, working on advertisements. I used to do some radio advertisements. I used to do signs. I have a long list. You can look at my website or search, how to find good deals at Coach Carson and find a lot of the ideas I've used over the years. And also have my course, Real Estate Deal School, goes into a lot of how do you find good deals. But the point being, I would spend time on the creativity, on the deep thinking of, all right, what do I need to do right now to generate leads so that I have people to talk to buy their house? Because the reality is it's a numbers game when you're buying properties. And if you're just looking on the MLS or just looking on Zillow for deals, you're not going to find the best deals. And that's in all markets, and especially right now when it's competitive, that's even more true. But in any market, if you really want to buy the best real estate investing deals, you've got to look off market. And so my deep work time for at least a couple hours per morning typically was feeding that funnel. Sometimes it was writing a letter. Sometimes it was doing things like stuffing envelopes, which is a little bit mundane. As I outsource things, I would think about systems. I go, how can I do this in a way that's a little bit better? Instead of just doing the work, I was thinking about the work. I was trying to improve the work. I was sometimes learning is what I do during my deep work time. So that was my real estate investing deep work. And there's always some time that you have to do active work. And so I had to go talk to sellers like I talked about before. I have to go meet with people. I have to take phone calls. But during that deep work time, the phone is off. The ringer's off. I like to put it in a drawer or a closet. Even though I turn it off, I don't even want to look at it. I put it in the drawer, I put it in the closet so that you can focus intensely on one thing. And if you're new to this, or if you don't have enough time in your day, you're like, I can't get 2 hours, start with 20 minutes, start with 10 minutes, start wherever you are. But the point is build that into your day. And just like the relationship time, actually schedule that, actually block it off in your calendar. So at the beginning of the week or whenever you do some planning or the beginning of the day, say that time, particularly I like it early in the morning, first thing in the morning. If you can get some good deep work time in right away, now you're kind of ahead of the day. And even though if the day gets away from you later on, you have meetings, you have things that happen, you've gotten that deep work time in first thing in the morning. And so if you can block that off, everybody knows, you tell everybody else, I've got an appointment. I can't be bothered at that time. You get your deep work done. Huge habit. It will make you much more productive. It'll make you much more effective at whatever you do. And that's how you bring some slowness to some effectiveness to your work. So the third takeaway I want to share with you in this episode is how you can bring some slowness into your personal life, into your personal habits. And I want to start off telling you another story. And this is actually in the same time period as my prior story in 2009. And this is at the beginning of the trip when we went to Spain. And my wife is a Spanish teacher. I love traveling abroad and learning languages as well. So we went to Spain and Salamanca. It's an old university city. Stayed there a couple of weeks. And then my parents came to visit us in Spain. We traveled around with them for another week. And then we made our way. We were there for a total of 6 weeks in Spain. And yeah, just to give you some context, I hustled to even get on this mini retirement trip. It was 2009, so the depths of the Great Recession. There's a lot of stress that was going on there. My business partner and I spent a ton of time just making sure our business would survive in 2007, 8, and 9. I felt like we were in a pretty good point to do that, but even at that point, that stress of the Great Recession and what was going on was on me as well. And it just, I'd gone from a period of hustle to this period of time in Spain where I'm just relaxing a little bit. But it really took to the end of the trip. And we were going from in a place that was pretty near Barcelona. Barcelona is a city kind of in northeastern part of Spain or on the Mediterranean coast. We took a bus to a little fishing village called Cadaqués. And it was actually the place where Salvador Dali, the famous painter, painted a lot of his surrealistic paintings. There's these really stony, kind of rocky coast with nice beaches and just a lot of wind and just a neat kind of area. We just found a little Airbnb at the time or inn, and we spent 12 days there, or 10 days there. And it was really, really slow to the point that it was very uncomfortable for me at times. But my wife thankfully encouraged us, let's just slow down, let's stay here. We had some books, we were reading books, we would take long walks along the beach. One day in particular, this is about 5 weeks into this total 6-week trip, we are sitting on, about halfway through the day, we went and ate a meal, we'd already walked around, we're just sitting on a little bench overlooking this beautiful bay, probably late afternoon, we're reading a book, my wife took a nap, just kind of hanging out there all the way until sunset. I think we brought some food with us and just kind of just stayed there. And as the sun set, we watched that. And then there's this big shooting star once it got dark that went across the sky. We're like, wow, this is amazing. What an experience. And during that like 4 or 5 hours of just chilling out in this one spot, at the end of chilling out of 4 or 5 weeks, right after being really stressed out, I could physically feel a knot untie in my chest. It was the most surrealistic feeling of it just relax. And all of that tension, all of that hustle that had been built up in my body was just in one moment, which is like untied that knot. And that was really kind of an aha moment for me. I'm into exercise. I'm into paying attention to my body and health, but how much stress had really been building up inside myself at 29 years old. And it made me think, like, if I continue this pace, if I continue this style of sprinting up the mountain for the rest of my life, what's that going to do to my body? Is that going to lead to heart attacks? Is that going to lead to mental breakdowns, anxiety? Because there's always a background anxiety on the other side of hustle. There's always a fear that you're not doing something correctly, or you got to be hustling, or FOMO, what's going on with other people? There, got to be competition. And that's healthy at times. Competition is good. It pushes you. But I don't think we're always designed to always be in that fight or flight state. That's a stress. And I'm not a doctor or a medical person, but I felt that stress. I bet you do too, knowing how sustaining that over a long period of time is not healthy. So that was kind of an aha moment for me. And so I want to share just a few habits, again, humbly, not that these are things that you need to do, but have been pretty helpful for me to slow down a little bit and to have a little bit better health. One of those for me, just a thing I do every single day without fail, even if I'm busy, I always get like at least a couple minutes of quiet time in the morning. If I have a regular day, maybe 30 minutes of quiet time, sometimes a little bit longer. And the quiet time can evolve and can change to whatever you want to do in your morning. If you're kind of have a religious bent, it could be reading religious type, your religious books or religious quotations or something spiritual that's helpful for you. But whatever your bent is, having something that's inspiring and that starts your day and frames it in a way that you want to deliberately. For me, there's a little bit of meditation, just breathing, just kind of getting into the day. There's reading something. It just depends on what I'm reading. I'm reading a lot of Stoicism right now, and so I'll read a couple phrases from that. You can see the shirt Heroic. I'm really big into Heroic. Is a kind of a coach of mine. Brian Johnson started this company. It's a personal development company and an app to help you sort of integrate virtues into your life, integrate good habits into your life. And so I do a little bit of my Heroic app in the morning, just reviewing like what are the things that are important to me? What are the virtues that I want to incorporate into my life so that I can try to, as things get chaotic during the day, I can remember that first thing in the morning that I started with a compass going in the right direction. I'm always going to fall off. Nobody's perfect, but you point yourself in the right direction with your goals, with your virtues, with whatever your moral compass is. Start your day that way in a quiet place. Man, what a habit that is. If you can do that and incorporate that into your life, it's been a huge game changer for me. That's probably, step number one. Another habit that's just a non-negotiable for me is some sort of movement, exercise throughout the day. Sometimes for me, that's actually running or walking. I love walking. That's just my favorite kind of everyday form. I've started a habit lately where I just try to incorporate some basics. So every morning I do this little yoga, sun salutation, stretching. A lot of it, I had a back injury in college, so I'm just trying to keep that back strong. My physical therapist gave me some exercises, so I'll spend 5 or 10 minutes doing those, usually first thing in the morning. I also do some planks. So I just have a certain amount of planks I want to do that's kind of strengthening your core. I want to do a certain number of burpees every day. There's a kind of up and down exercise that gets your heart moving, kind of total body exercise. And then I try to get 10,000 steps. So just a series of little exercises I try to do every single day, and I incorporate those into breaks. When I'm doing my deep work, I might work for 30 minutes, take a break and do 10 burpees. Or if you don't do burpees, do push-ups or stretches or whatever. Just stand up, kind of move your body throughout the day, and then incorporate some kind of exercise when you can. Whatever level you're at, right? Don't hurt yourself, don't push yourself too much. But that for me, that movement exercise, that first thing in the morning, just a foundational, couldn't do without it. Affects everything else I do, but that kind of slow time in the morning and the slow breaks throughout the day to move, to exercise, to breathe are just integral for me to not letting the hurry and the rush kind of take me away. I'll share a couple more habits that have been really helpful for me. One of those, I talked about the beginning of the day, the AM quiet time. The other is on the other end of the day, a PM digital sunset. And this is another idea I got from Brian Johnson over at Heroic. Check him out. He's got a lot of free information and ideas like this on his website and in the app. But the idea is that you have 2 times in your day when you can actually incorporate slowness and have a little bit of control over your day. The beginning of the day, the end of the day. And so for me, sleep has always been a challenge. When you're a go getter, you'll keep working late into the night. So for the last 4 or 5 years, I've tried to incorporate this PM digital sunset, and you just set a time when after that time, you turn your cell phone off, you put it away, you don't look at it anymore. At least that's the way it works for me. Especially about an hour or hour and a half before you want to go to bed. So if you're trying to go to bed by 11:30 or try to go to sleep by then, by 10:30 or 10, have that be your digital sunset. And that doesn't mean you go to sleep right away, but it allows you to start winding down. You turn the lights down. You're letting your body know that this is a time to sleep. 100 years ago, or 150 years ago, we didn't have electricity and lights, blaring everything at night. It was a little different. You would go to sleep with the sunset. You would go to sleep with candles, perhaps. It was just a little bit different kind of relationship with light and digital blue light. And so for me, another habit, self-care, slowing down. Let's get into sleep. Sleep's the ultimate slowness that we have to incorporate in our life. And it's something that gets missed, right? It seems almost boring sometimes. Oh man, I got things to do. When am I going to sleep? I'll sleep when I'm dead, right? That's a phrase you hear people say. No, sleep is the integral thing that helps you be more effective. It helps you get more done. It helps you have better relationships. So for me, again, exercise, sleep, AM ritual, PM ritual, those are kind of mental health, physical health, just non-negotiables for me. And I want to get into kind of finally here in this personal habit strategy. Personal health is really important, but also there's this idea of slowing down to enjoy life. That, when I'm hiking that Colca Canyon and I'm going so fast, I'm not paying attention to the colors of the leaves around me or the vistas and the views that are around me. That's, if you're rushing to the end of life, you miss the point, you miss the journey along the way. That's the cliche that you probably heard a lot. And so how do you incorporate habits that allow you to appreciate life along the way? One of those for me is during that PM ritual, when I turn off the cell phone, is I've started really getting into storytelling, especially here with the podcast and the YouTube channel. But it's just been a personal habit of writing down at least one story-worthy moment. And I got this idea from a book called Story-Worthy. It talks about storytelling. But it's really something to help you remember just moments. Most of these stories are nothing I would share with anybody else. Often they're about my family, something funny that my daughter said to me, or just a sweet moment when we were walking to school, holding hands or something. All those little moments that typically pass you by. And by writing them down, I just have a little note card, and I've been doing it for about a year now. Write it down every day, at least one story. You write it down. It could just be a sentence or two. We went to get some ice cream. It was really fun moment together. Or we hiked to the top of this hill today. You just write it down. And what's cool is you can look down back at the end of the week, review these stories, or just look at the end of the year, end of the quarter, whenever, and you start noticing all of the stories of your life. And we human beings are storytelling vehicles. Stories are integrated into everything we do. And for me, it's helped me savor life a little bit more, appreciate it more. It's also been practical because as I write those stories down, I remember another story. And as a storyteller, communicator, this has been very helpful for me as well in my content. But just from a personal standpoint, enjoying slowing down, enjoying life, I highly recommend having stories. And then one final habit, and this has been pretty full section here in this third one about personal habits. I want to recommend something called a sabbatical or a mini retirement in order to enjoy and savor life a little bit more. And I know this can be a hard one. If you're busy, and just getting a day off might be difficult. But if you can find a way to incorporate a week, 2 weeks, maybe eventually 2 or 3 months, by taking a break from the fast-pacedness of your life and just slowing down, this has been one of the game changers for me. It was so impactful when I took that 2009 trip that I've talked a lot about in this episode, that I committed at that point to always incorporating it. I like work. I like going. I like hustling. These days, I'm creating a lot of content. I'm teaching a course pretty often. But this trip to Spain that we're taking is a deliberate effort, because I know myself that if I don't physically take myself out of my situation where I am in my life and put myself somewhere else, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep pushing. And boy, when I get here and I actually relax and enjoy the moment, I almost didn't do this. I can't believe I would not have done this Spain trip after being here and slowing down and appreciating it. It's a way to savor life a little bit more. It's a way to think about and reflect on your life. And honestly, it's been a way to be more effective when I am climbing and when I am hustling, because I've had time to think about it. And sometimes you hustle for years and years and years, and you're going in the wrong direction. And having these pauses in your life, whether it's a week, just a retreat for a week, or eventually these longer mini retirements or sabbaticals, they're times for you to kind of get inside your own head, to think where you're going in life, not waiting till the end of your life to kind of enjoy these slow moments and a quote retirement, like mixing that kind of retirement mentality in throughout your life. What a huge habit for me, been really important. And to the extent that you can, highly recommend you do that as well. So the point of all of this, again, has been to slow down your life in your personal relationships, in your work, in your personal habits, that we have a tendency to hurry. We have a tendency to hustle, to over hustle. There's a pressure from society to do that. You're not going to get the message to slow down, and typically from the world around you. You're going to have to make choices that are kind of against the grain to do this. And yet, I hope that I've presented a case that is completely necessary. If you want to be healthier, if you want to enjoy life a little bit more, if you want to be more effective at work and actually be good at your craft, to be a craftsman or a craft woman as a real estate investor or whatever you do, slowing down is essential for that. And if you want to have good relationships at your workplace, if you want to have good relationships personally, slowing down is the key to that. It's the foundation of being able to do that. And in the spirit of pushing back against the pressures that are going to not allow you to slow down, I want to read one of my favorite quotes from Henry David Thoreau, and who was even back in the early 1800s was having to push back against society a little bit. He went to live in the woods at Walden Pond in Massachusetts, and famously he said, "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. I wanted to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what they had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." I think that sums this up pretty nicely. Henry David Thoreau. I want to wish all of you a lot of luck in slowing things down a little bit, just a little bit at a time, right? This isn't something you can do overnight, but incorporate some slowness into your life, into your personal habits, to your work, into your relationships. I want to wish you the best of luck of that. I would love to hear from you. If you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment below. Let me know if this is helpful for you. This is a little bit of a different tack from some of my kind of very practical running the numbers real estate content, but this is content that I enjoy. I hope it's also helpful for you as a real estate investor, just as a person. So let me know in the comments, or if you're listening to this on the podcast, send an email to podcast@coachcarson.com. Let me know what you think about this episode, or if you have any suggestions for future episodes. I'm getting back into creation mode, doing my deep work for my podcast. So be sure to look out for future episodes. I've got YouTube episodes coming up and some podcast interviews. I'm going to get back into doing some interviews this fall. So thank you very much for being a listener to the podcast or watching on YouTube. Really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time.